Hey guys, sorry I've been incommunicado for the last week and a half or two. Just been really busy, had a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to get back to doing more regular videos. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different. I want to preface this by saying that I am not a mental health specialist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just giving you my experience. Okay? As many of you know, well, I think this video may get a lot of eye rolls and a lot of people making fun of me, but I really don't care. Well, probably care a little bit, but I want to do this because I feel like it might help other people. And if it'll help other people, then I'll take the criticism. So, many of you know I was bullied when I was younger. It's one of the things that got me into weightlifting. So, overall, it was probably a good thing. But there have been things that have come up in my life in situations where I did not act appropriately. My response to a certain situation or relationship or something like that was not appropriate. Either I underreacted or overreacted. And I've been working with a therapist for a few months now to figure out some of these things and figure out why. And she's a trauma specialist, amongst other things. And basically, we talked a lot about like my growing up, my history. It's not that my life has been terrible or anything like that, because it hasn't at all. But I really, I try to, not always, but I try to be honest with myself and try to improve things that I feel like are deficiencies in my life. And she basically diagnosed me one day, said that she thought I had PTSD from the bullying. Now, come to find out, bullying PTSD is different. With most PTSD, there is not really positive things associated with it. Whereas what we call APBS, which is adult post-bullying syndrome, it's a mouthful. There are positives associated with it, because a lot of those kids, if they make it through, tend to be more focused, more motivated, more resilient, because of what they encountered when they were younger. But there are some definite downsides associated with it. And at first, I was very resistant to that label. Just the idea of PTSD, not because I hated the idea of having PTSD or some kind of trauma, but because I had always heard the the term PTSD and thought, okay, that's somebody who was in war, who saw things, people, terrible, terrible things, and it, mentally scarred them, and they can't sleep, and they can't go to, movies and all this kind of stuff. And I guess in a way I felt like I would be insulting people who had, actually been through that. And what she said to me was, well, if you're unwilling to accept this, it's actually insulting for people who have it, who didn't go through war. Because there's plenty of people who have PTSD who didn't go through, who weren't soldiers and that sort of thing. And again, I'm not trying to put it on that level. It doesn't usually affect me that much. But like I said, there have been certain situations, relationships, whatever, where something has happened and I have not reacted appropriately, either overreacted, underreacted. And it just, I can remember, feeling certain ways about things that would happen, and it would be like, especially when I felt like in a situation where I had no options or control, or I felt helpless, that would really trigger a very, very, very swift and strong response in me. Rather than sitting down, analyzing the situation, coming up with reasonable or logical things to do, I would kind of react swiftly and very strongly, and not always appropriately. So anyway, but I was very resistant to this at first. And what she said was, Lane, would you let me argue with you about a nutritional diagnosis? I said, I'd probably let you argue a little bit, but not much. She said, well, don't argue with me about this. I've kind of accepted, or not accepted, but have tried to think about what I would say, because I think a lot of people will probably criticize me and say exactly what I just said, that, you know, you weren't in war, this and that. That's fine. All I'm going to do is give you my experience and what it meant to me and did for me. So unlike PTSD, where there don't seem to be any positives associated with PTSD, there are actually some positives associated with APBS, which makes it a little bit different. So with APBS, a lot of people, because they were bullied when they're younger, it made them more driven, it made them more focused, it made them basically want to prove people wrong, which definitely resonates with me. And again, this is just things I've read. I'm not a specialist. I could get some of this stuff wrong. I'm just giving my experience. And people will say, well, I got bullied when I was younger, or I had this thing happen, whatever. And it didn't affect me. And maybe that's true, but everybody's different and you're not me. Maybe I'm a little more sensitive than most people. That's also possible. I would say that my bullying was definitely a little bit different level than what most people experience. Most people, their peers give them a hard time or whatever. Mine was intense and sustained emotional bullying. Never much physical. I only had one physical altercation when I was in high school. And that, I mean, obviously everybody has different perceptions of how a fight went. But I think most people would agree that I came out on top in the fight. So it was actually, in a way, it was good for me, because I stood up for myself. Not that I condone fighting, but I think it's also, I love my mother, but one of the things she told me was you should never fight back under any circumstance. And I think that was probably a mistake, because it took away my autonomy. I felt like I had no choice. Like if I was being just emotionally, I mean, literally, I would be literally put in a corner by 4 or 5 people and just obliterated. And that would happen frequently. And I felt like I had nothing I could do, because if I said anything, they were just going to turn it back around and use it against me. If I didn't say anything, they were just going to go harder. People that tell you just ignore bullying, it'll go away, they're full of shit. It does not go away. And if anything, it would intensify it for me. The only thing that temporarily got it to stop actually was the physical altercation I had with one individual. Again, I'm not saying that you should just punch everybody that bullies you. But what I felt like for a long time was, since I couldn't physically defend myself from emotional bullying, I felt completely out of control. I felt like I felt trapped, anxious, and like there was nothing I could do. And that helpless feeling is a very terrible feeling. So I did see a counselor when I was younger, but this stuff wasn't identified. We just thought I had low self-esteem. But part of that low self-esteem was from the bullying. And one particular instance I can remember was, I have ADHD or ADD, whichever. And my mom was really good about, learning about ADD, coping mechanisms, study things, how for study. Like, I know for me, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to do a task where it requires me to study or sit down and write, whatever, I can do that task 45 minutes, and then I've got to take at least a 15-minute break and just completely deplug from that. I'm not the kind of person who can just sit down and study for 3 hours straight. I know I can't do that. If I try to force myself to do that, it won't work out well. Anyway, my mom, she became head of CHAD, which is Children and Adults with ADD, in southwestern Indiana. And so she actually got so well educated on it that she started speaking to groups and teachers and other people about I don't want to call it disability. I never viewed it as a disability, but about the condition. Well, and when I was about 12 years old, I think I was in middle school, the newspaper, the local paper, wanted to follow our family around because we all were my brother and I are both diagnosed with ADD, and my mom and dad were never diagnosed with it, but mom definitely had it, and maybe dad had it. So kind of like a family, we call it with the gift, we call it. And they followed me around all day. They followed me around for a couple of days at school. And man, the kids were just absolutely brutal to me those couple of days. I mean, just absolutely brutal. And I remember I just kind of had to grit and bear it like they were my buddies, just giving me a hard time because I didn't want to show that I was getting bullied, and I didn't want to get upset on camera. Well, come to find out later, I found out that that particular group of kids, their goal was to get me to cry on camera. And I just can't, even at that age, I just remember thinking, who would do something like that? Like, how fucked up is that? And that was only one instance. I mean, there was a lot of instances of bullying, and that was not out of the norm. That one just stuck out to me. But there were things like that pretty much sustained. But I can't say it was all negative because I can remember even at a young age, probably 8, 9 years old, thinking, I'm going to prove these people wrong. These people think I have no self-worth. I'm going to prove them wrong. And as corny as it sounds or as cheesy as it sounds, proving people wrong has actually been a favorite pastime of mine. So whenever I get injured, yes, I go on social media and I read the comments from people who are making fun of me about being injured. And I let that sink in. I let myself get that rage. Because whether you think that's healthy or not, I use that. So it's probably why I respond so harshly to some criticisms on social media. I don't handle criticism well. And that's probably from my experience with bullying, because I perceive, even when it's not constructive criticism, usually when people frame it in a very positive way, I respond to it well. But if somebody just comes in with criticism that isn't necessarily an attack, but is harsh criticism, I usually don't respond to that well. And at least with my therapist and I, we've determined that that is because of basically my background in bullying, that I perceive that as an attack. And I tend to get very defensive. And that's something I'm working on, is not just when somebody criticizes me, launching to defend myself and be defensive. So I think that I'll probably stop it there. I just wanted to kind of put out like my history, and I'm probably going to build on this, do a few videos on this about, things that happen, and just be completely transparent. I've messed a lot of stuff up in my life, but I've always been able to learn from it. And I think that a lot of people go through this. I wish I'd had this information 15, 20, 25 years ago. I really do. Because it would have helped me so much and understand why, I've struggled with certain relationships in my life, whether it be girlfriends in the past or friends, or people who were friends who are no longer friends. I would consider myself largely having good relationships in my life, but there are definitely some areas where I've struggled. And I think a lot of times what we tend to do is dismiss what happened to us at a younger age. And especially with this kind of stuff, because it is embarrassing for people who go through it. I don't like admitting that I was bullied, and I don't like admitting that it affected me. But I figure maybe there's a kid watching this, or maybe there's a parent watching this who maybe wasn't taking what was happening seriously, and now can take it seriously. I mean, I think, honestly, if you're getting bullied, what you can do, ignoring it doesn't really help it stop. Sometimes it does, at least in my experience. Fighting back in a certain way, it can stop it short term, but even if you win fights, that has negative consequences as well. I got lucky in that I didn't get in trouble for the fight I was in. Kind of trying to hurl insults back typically, if you're on the lower end of the social hierarchy, it doesn't matter what you say, no matter how funny it is, no matter what you do, it's just going to get turned back around on you. I think the best thing you can do is find ways to build your own self-esteem and try to disconnect from what somebody is telling you and not necessarily take that to heart. That is a very, very, very hard thing to do. And I'm not even good with it now, but I always try to recite the quote from Les Brown, and that is, someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. And so just because someone says something about you doesn't mean you have to take it in. And there's a proverb, an African proverb, I think, and it's, if there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. And those are two things I repeat to myself quite a bit. And I've still had experiences where I've screwed things up, and I'll talk more about those. But I just thought this video might be useful for people who have dealt with this in the past, or parents who are dealing with it, that sort of thing. And parents, be honest too, like if you think your kid's a bully, like go from that side. Your kid might not be the angel you think. It doesn't mean they're a bad kid. A lot of times they're peer pressured into bullying, okay? Because they're either going to be bullied or they can either bully or be bullied, and so they choose to bully. So again, like be honest with yourself, like observe your kid's behavior, because this stuff does hurt people. I feel like it affected me very little out of what it could. I've never had, I don't think I have a depressive personality, I guess I would say. I've never considered to be in a situation where I've been depressed. I've had things that have made me sad, but I've never been depressed. But if I had, oh my God, every year there are kids who take their own lives, and I don't want to say caused by bullying, but that would be a major impetus for it. And so I think parents, you need to be honest about whether your kids whether they are being bullied or not. And if they are being bullied, you need to take that situation very seriously. And they may not even tell you, so you need to pay close attention. And if they are bullies, you need to try and figure out why they are acting that way. A lot of times it starts at home. Maybe it's behavior they've learned. I'm not saying that I don't think anybody teaches their kid to be a bully, but you have to understand that sometimes your actions towards other people are what kids pick up on, and that's what they know. So this video has gone a lot longer than I intended it to. I realize there's people out there who will probably watch this video and eye roll at me about, oh yeah, PTSD from bullying, etc., etc. Listen, fine, you're entitled to your opinion. I would say I don't really care, but based on my experience with APBS, it will be hard for me not to care. So I'm working on not giving a shit about your opinion. But, I'm just putting this out there as something that I hope can help other people, and just to be mindful of it. I'll probably do some other videos on this topic if you guys are interested. Again, not an expert, not a mental health expert, just my experience. All right, guys, I will catch you next time.